so much, Professor Ganesh. You're right. I think for me, every time I come to a forum, whether it used to be in the physical domain or online, where I interact with the IMI community, while there is an instant connect with new batches as well, I think there is an indescribable connect with the the founding team, whether it is my batchmates or it's faculty like yourselves, Professor. We are a very small batch. I think the bonds are much deeper than one can normally describe. So thank you so much for having me here, sir. And we look forward to creating this as something as a lasting legacy, the way IIM Indore has evolved from our first batch itself. Well, good afternoon, everyone. As the professor introduced the things that I've been doing and the things I'll be talking about. So without much ado, I'll jump into it. But I want to put a caveat up front. The caveat is that the space is vast, it's emerging. My perspectives come from, things that I have seen, things that I've been more involved with. And there would be things that may get left out. So, at any point you want certain things to be addressed, please feel free. And then we could take it up if possible. Okay, so we're nearing the end of October 2021. And an interesting thing I wanted to share with you while I was preparing for this talk, that for the last 1 week, I've been regularly seeing one particular ad on social media. The ad is by a top international airline. Some of you may have come across that as well. But for the benefit of others, I'll paraphrase it here. The ad copy says, "Video calls are great, but real life is better. Fly to London with fares starting from rupees 47,000 return." Now, this is a company with a 100-year plus legacy. That industry as well as more than 100 years old, which is telling people in 2021 that video calls are great, but real life is better. Yes, we all know the background, that they, like much of the world, are trying to claw their way back to an erstwhile state of normalcy. Yes, we all know that the pandemic forced so many people indoors. So amongst the industries hardest hit, travel and hospitality were one of those. But this particular example took me back to a discussion that happened during one of our lectures at IIM Indore around the year 1998 or 99. The internet was a relatively new phenomenon then. The latest edition of Kotler had just introduced one chapter on online marketing. It was that new. Google hadn't become the synonym for search yet at that point of time. But in that discussion in 1998-99 around threats and substitutes in industries, we had debated that the internet could be a threat to online travel.
Let's go, my friend.
It's a huge flex of an argument. We are in 1998-99, and for somebody to say that internet, which is still emerging, is going to be a threat to online airline travel was a huge flex. It was an extended argument. And on the contrary, the intervening 2 decades, we saw something very different. The internet only made airline travel and most other forms of travel easier and more accessible for people at large. We've seen this at scale in India. So this example of a top airline trying to wrest its place back from video calls, for me, closed a 20-year-old loop. There was a loop, and then, oh yes, of course, that has happened. So therefore, it was a little special for me, and I thought I'll kind of bring that up in this discussion. The second point, this brings me to another example, which some of you would have come across that, but to the others, it would be my request to search for that and make it a point of your future reference point also. This was one of the most iconic symbols of transformative technologies changing the world in a short span of time. So this particular reference point is from 2 pictures which are kept side by side. Both of them show the 5th Avenue in New York City, and they're showing the busy street. But one photograph is from 1900, the year 1900, and one photograph is from the year 1913, 13 years apart. And the caption on both pictures is as follows. The 1900 picture has a caption, "Spot the car." So I'll try and paint that picture, for those of you not seeing. So it's a perspective of a busy New York Fifth Avenue street in 1900. The road is full of people walking and horse carriages. Maybe 20, 30, maybe 30, 40 horse carriages and hundreds of people. And somewhere you can spot one or two cars. Those have actually been circled in that picture. Now, the parallel picture from 1913, the caption is "Spot the horse carriage." And lo and behold, when you look at this picture, what you see are 30, 40 cars, a lot of people walking, and just one or two horse carriages. So in a matter of 13 years, a little more than a decade, the automobile technology had completely transformed how people commuted. And this remains one of the big examples. When you look at it, you're like, oh my God, this will not take 50 years, 100 years. This has happened in a matter of 13 years. And this, I think, even Morgan Stanley had put out in a report, if I'm getting the year right, 2011, 12. And they had kind of brought this contrast out. Now, any examples of transformative technologies of a similar scale and impact closer home in India? Of course, there's a Jio impact. Never let go of an opportunity to talk about it. So India moved from a rank of 155th in mobile broadband penetration to being the #1 country in mobile data consumption. This happened in less than 2 years. Now think about it again. I'm sure you've seen the impact, and I'm just trying to kind of narrow it down a little further. In just 2 years, from being the absolute last list of countries, we actually leapfrogged to become the #1 country. Which are the countries that we beat? Of course, there is the US. There are countries in the developed world. We beat China, and we became the #1 country where per capita consumption of mobile data happens. Totally transformative use of technology. But I'll just add something more to that. It doesn't only about the fastest transition from a 2G, 3G network to a 4G network, fastest transition in the world. It is also about how this particular transformation set the base for transformative changes in other industries in India as well. And what are the examples that I want to pick up for that? Just look at payments. Some years ago, payments meant you had to use the banking infrastructure. Checks were written, and then checks had to travel, and then all you guys are aware of how that workflow kind of happens. Then, of course, there were credit cards, which of course had an issue of certain amount of penetration happening in India being limited to a few percent of the users. And then we are in 2021, and mobile payments have become ubiquitous in just 5 years. And one of the unequivocal success stories, there are no ambiguities in this, is the growth of UPI. The payments interface, which was completely adopted across the industry, launched in 1916. I'll share some the stats of September 21. So there are 259 banks which are participating in the UPI platform. They do 3.65 billion monthly transactions. The value of the transactions is upwards of 650 lakh crores. This happens on a monthly basis. And this is growing month on month, quarter on quarter, year on year. Of course, there have been dips, a couple of months of dip during the extreme stages of the pandemic. But this has been something just completely transformed how people make their payments. A lot of these payments are P2P, peer-to-peer. And a lot of these, and some of these payments, the smaller chunk of these payments currently is peer to user to merchant when you go to a retail establishment. And of course, this mix will change and evolve as the years go by. But classic case of a pure technology-driven success that has impacted life across India. Now, I want to contrast this with the US. So in the US, I'll pick up another, there's a tweet by a gentleman named Benedict Evans. Some of you may be aware of who he is. He's an absolute top level analyst and commentator in the technology space. So he put out a recent tweet, I think 1 or 2 days back. He said, I asked, and I'm quoting, I'm paraphrasing. So I talked to my US bank. How do I transfer money to someone else's account at your bank? And the bank said, we will mail them a check. Now, somewhere, there's a little tongue in cheek. You may take it with a pinch of salt, but somewhere this exemplifies where, the payments infrastructure in an advanced market like the US is vis-a-vis what we've seen in India, especially with UPI. Now, therefore, in the analysts and the commentators go on to say that one witnesses a lot of hectic activity around the payments business in these markets because what they are trying to solve, the solution they are trying to address, the problem they're trying to address, uses solutions which are decades old or maybe half a century old. So therefore, the people out there get very excited with new technologies, and you'll hear a lot of them. They ride the hype cycle, some of them fall back, but none of them have been able to have an impact the way UPI has had in India. Interestingly, so the top tech giants, of the top 2-3 players, including those who worked in India on UPI, they've been requesting the US, federal banks to adopt a UPI kind of a template or UPI kind of structure for their market as well. Now, it's a way, again, let's put it in perspective again. Normally, we've been the receiver of innovation, especially in the tech domain and all. Here is an example where top tech company in the world requests the US, regulators and policymakers to follow the solution that India adopted, and this particular giant was also a party to seeing that flourish in India. So names I'm kind of leaving for your trivia quizzes later on, but the summary is what I am kind of putting before you. Okay, the next big area to be impacted by technology is going to be education. It's no-brainer. I think a lot of you who are aware of how the Indian market pans out this would be an obvious choice in your assessment as well. But then in this also, I'll go back again to my time at IIM Indore. So the year was 2000, the year that we graduated. Just before we had graduated, McKinsey had organized a competition called India Ventures 2000. They had organized for startups in India. Of course, this was the first .com boom, and McKinsey thought they'll bring it to India, and they launched this competition for startups. So our team of 4 from IIM Indore, we qualified for the finals. So we were selected for the finals, with a business plan for taking education, one part of the education value chain online. So McKinsey organized meetings for us with VCs and investors in Mumbai and elsewhere, but where every investor who we met advised us against taking up the idea full time. They said the market wasn't big enough, and we listened to them. In hindsight, one can question whether we did the right thing or the wrong thing. But if I were to kind of rationalize that particular time, the underlying market in education was always there. The enabling infrastructure wasn't. So perhaps therefore, when we talk of product market fitment, or when the time is right for an idea to scale and bloom, perhaps one of the rationalizations maybe that wasn't the time. But what Jio has done since its launch is that we've at least enabled this part of the connectivity to a big extent. Then, of course, the pandemic came, and then it vicariously accelerated what was an inevitable shift towards online education. But it would have been differently paced, but kind of the pandemic forced our hand. But as we go about addressing this skew, and the skew is there, a lot of analysts, and even from our anecdotes, it comes out that there's a bit of a skew right now in the way online education is, how well is it penetrated and how much participation does it see from students. Once the skew starts getting addressed, there's a huge opportunity for students, teachers, institutions, industries, people who create content, people who can look at creating businesses and other valuable services on top of this infrastructure. And this evolution will happen across multiple areas. There's, of course, there's formal and informal segmentation of education. Even right now, people are talking of in-class and after-class. So there are organizations which are enabling in-class dissemination of information. I mean, institutes of IIM Indore, like IIM Indore, have been doing it for a very long time. And I mean, you guys have been there. I saw it for the very first time. Day one, we were an absolute top quality internet connected institute. And at that point, in 98, we were, I think, one of the first, maybe the first in certain areas to have this kind of infrastructure. So in class, after class, then there is, whether technology in education is going to be used for augmentation of the curriculum or embedding itself into the curriculum somehow. There are, of course, there is skill building, knowledge building. There is academic calendar-based education or self-paced education, vocational or recreational or self-development kind of education. There are segments like live video-based or recorded video archives. Then there are models like one-to-one education or one-to-many, structured assessment or AI-based assessment and feedback. Now, the last one, AI-based assessment. Jio's MI platform has actually been doing a lot of innovative stuff in that. So the platform reads how you perform in that environment, and the rest of the program gets tailored to what it sees as your gap areas or areas in which you may need special attention. So it's an area with vast potential. And also remember, the addressable population that you're talking about would be upwards of 200, 220 million students at any point of time, or if you take the entire gamut of education put together. So this is a huge area. The next big area that typically comes along with education is the area of healthcare. Here also the evolution of the impact of technology in healthcare could see a skew to begin with. But once that is addressed, the impact will cut across challenges of access, equity, sustainability. Those are the issues that normally get raised. So technology is going to be solving a lot of problems out there. Like with other industries, the pandemic hastened parts of the healthcare ecosystem, getting deployed at a much faster pace. An example that I'll pick up is, for example, the management of the vaccine rollout across sectors, both public and private. It has used and depended on an underlying technology platform. There are many areas where we ought to and we will be doing much better, based on our learnings of the recent past. And these learnings have come from a variety of sources, and some of these learnings have been organic as well. For example, how social communities of people, volunteers, activists, and communities like IIM Indore, we saw a lot of community activities in IIM Indore alumni as well, trying to organize help, augmenting the efforts of other institutions or other bigger organizations. So there were learnings in how this information was being aggregated, being filtered through, being passed on, leads being validated, logistics help being provided, and all of this at an organic level. So there are learnings that have come from this as well. Then, of course, there are learnings that are there in the area of sourcing, supply, and distribution of equipment, drugs, kits, and these will borrow significantly from the expertise of e-commerce, delivery, and logistics players. So other than that, of course, in the healthcare, it's a huge area. The other evolution that will happen, and some of them will be absolutely, fantastic, would be in the area of healthcare delivery, right from primary healthcare and going all the way, up to specialist healthcare, and in areas like surround areas like insurance, etc. So these are areas where there'll be a lot of technology, innovations that one will see, and the impact will be hugely transformational. Now, from these obvious, two sectors, the other sector where the role of technology has been transformative, and a lot of us would have perceived it firsthand, is media and entertainment. Now, this also is an industry which has a 100-year legacy. If you look at cinema, television, the other mass media, the internet, and yet some of their rules have been and are being totally rewritten in a very short span of time. Okay, let's take the example of films and television. Now, their discovery, delivery, distribution is happening online and is happening across multiple devices and screens. Now, this has happened in a very short period of time. You think about an industry with a 100-year legacy, TV in India would have about 40 to 50 year legacy. If you talk of color television, that would be around about 40. Cable and satellite would be about 30 years. Internet would be about a 20-year legacy. But all of that has changed the last couple of years. The behavioral aspect of consuming these is also getting transformed. So these are industries that work on concepts like box office, breaking news, prime time, live TV, appointment-based viewing. So all these concepts, and they've taken years to build up, decades to build up. They are being replaced with new concepts like binge watching, live streaming, AMAs, Ask Me Anything, Twitter storms, tweet storms, and live platforms across all social networks where anybody can go live in a matter of seconds and interact with an audience and disseminate the content or experience that they have to provide. Not only this, the core units of these media are also being redefined. So instead of a 2-3 hour feature film or a 20-23 minute TV episode or a 5-minute music video, we now have 10, 15, 30, 60-second short videos, which are also redefining things like fashion, things like advertising, how brands talk to audiences, and artist-audience relationships. Now, here's a relationship, if you think about it, again, let's go back 30 years. How would you interact with the top superstar of your entertainment industry? And I'm talking, this cuts across, it's true for India, it also cuts across all geographies as well. There's something I've said at many such forums, and I've been saying it for maybe the last 10-15 years. So a lot of the credibility or the brand of a journalist or journalistic organization was built on how they would manage to have access to a top star, a top film star. You would see, consume, and form an association with the film star only based on the films that you would see, or ancillary content, whether you would read a magazine or you would read about them, etc., or you would see something on television. And how today the journalism, there is no, what should I say, there's no great privilege for a journalist today to be able to talk to a top star like that, because every star today is talking to the audience directly, right from his bedroom. He wakes up in the morning, the star or the artist talks to his audience, his or her audience on it directly. So suddenly you eliminated one set of people, but then these people have repurposed themselves, and they become aggregators of what these people are saying to their audience. They repurpose this as content for another set of audience. Hey, Amitabh Bachchan said this in a tweet this morning, and this is how people have reacted. Now this becomes the news. The earlier news would have been, well, what, Amitabh Bachchan believes this and he said this, etc. But now it's about how that big star has talked to his audiences. So things are getting redefined. So and I'm just taking 2 or 3 of these areas right now. There are many other areas, things like electric vehicles. You would have heard, of course, there's a lot of talk around cryptocurrencies, blockchain. A lot of the discussion now are happening around concepts like metaverse, alternate realities, virtual realities, augmented reality. Then there is the new concept has come up, which is called Web 3.0. So they'll keep coming at a very fast pace. So given how fast these technologies come in and changes take place, is it really possible to be prepared to tackle these? And obviously there is no yes or no kind of answer for this, but a few points are clear. One is the cliche, change is inevitable, is a fundamental truth. I mean, I know it always sounds cliche, and every time somebody gives it to you, it comes across as a cliche only. But what to do? It is a fundamental truth, and it's understandable. Organizations, enterprises resist change when they've invested a lot of capital, time, their belief. So it's natural. And corporations falter while trying to adapt to technology. First, they don't acknowledge that change is coming, and then even if they acknowledge, they're unable to react either in time or have the correct strategy to react. And even if they do, their timing may not be appropriate. And I'm sure all of you in your respective industries as well as across would have seen examples like Kodak, this leader in photographic equipment, irrelevant, kind of driven to irrelevancy today. Nokia, BlackBerry, these are big names. And you would see that they lost their preeminence in a matter of years, not decades. So all of them are stellar companies, and they got overtaken by emerging technologies. And of course, the analogy that is given is that for big ships to change course fast, they cannot do it as fast or as nimbly as smaller vessels. And this analogy is, kind of brought out repeatedly. But there are some significant examples, where companies, far-sighted companies, have planned for and successfully navigated such eventualities. And I'm using the word navigated rather than, saying that, it may not be possible for you to get into a new industry and, succeed and come out, all guns blazing. The prime example is a company that owns the world's most dominant PC operating system and has a near monopoly on work productivity software. So the company I'm talking about. You know what? They famously missed first the internet wave and then the mobile wave. They missed both of them. And I mean, this is their own leadership and management over the years who have admitted this. They've totally missed it. And yet, we're talking 2021, they became a true $2 trillion company earlier this year. So look at the size of a company. They have a certain, and they are riding an ecosystem that they've created. The ecosystem is slightly older than their new emerging ecosystems like the internet and mobile. They half tried in mobile. They did try seriously, and they missed out on both. And yet they managed to reinvent themselves around, their core strengths, how the industry was emerging, what is the role that they can play in this to be a trillion, not a $2 trillion company, double $1 trillion company in that sense. Another example, and this is much closer to, they're very close to them because I've worked with them. So I've previously had the chance to work with them. It's a company that had made China's most popular online instant messaging platform for the PC. They enjoyed massive usage, loyalty, and engagement. I mean, the way you've seen a mobile being used by all of us today, that was a usage of that particular, messaging platform on PCs in China in the 90s, in the late 90s, early 2000s. But they saw that the world was going to shift to mobile devices in a very big way. Again, this is a part of that ability to see something, and what do you do with it? So they had the option of reimagining their mothership software and bring it out in a mobile avatar. Technology-wise, it was one of the easiest things to do, just to make a mobile instance or a mobile experience for their core platform. And yet they decided to launch an entirely new mobile-first platform, and thereby they reimagined the entire product from a mobile-first experience for the customer. So the difference, I'll again repeat. They did not convert a PC-based software which had a huge, love of which enjoyed a huge love and acceptability by the audience. They did not make it into mobile and say you can use it on the mobile also. They let that continue, and they also started a new ship. They set out a new ship, but reimagined from scratch only for a mobile-first experience. And they then created the most sensational mobile platform in China. This platform then became the standard that every global mobile company anywhere in the world, including in India, has aspired to emulate. Very few will come close to succeeding out there. But here's another example. Hugely successful. Do not change the course of your old ship. Launch a new ship. So you manage the uncertainty on your own terms. Now, since I started with the example of an airline company, when I 25 minutes ago when I started. An airline company which implored people to get off video calls and travel again, I'll wrap up my talk and I'll conclude with an example of another kind of in-the-air travel that was in the headlines recently. So one after the other, three of the most high-profile private space technology companies, organized or launched flights which either took people into space or near space experiences. They took people for the first time. These are non-military, non-governmental initiatives. For the first time, you had people, civilians in that sense, going up in the air like that. Now, critics immediately, there was a bunch of critics immediately panned these initiatives as these are commercially non-feasible, just fun flights of billionaires, and it doesn't make any sense. It's interesting point with each of these companies which run these three space enterprises have extremely successful or extremely big businesses in other related or unrelated domains. And then they decided to do something like this. Now, one still doesn't know how this entire business of space travel, space tourism, how it will pan up in the years or decades to come, whether it will lead to interplanetary travel or whether, it would lead to more facilities being made possible, enhanced facilities for us on the Earth with these, companies' work. But again, I'm saying if I, as an absolute layman in that domain of technology, if I were to look at it, I'll argue that while these three flights that one saw may or may not translate into the vision of interplanetary travel, but they definitely are going to have an impact and will completely reimagine intercontinental travel on the Earth. Think of traveling, taking a flight from New Delhi or Mumbai to London or New York, the amount of time it takes, the kind of the way that industry has evolved. And now with these breakthrough technologies, initially for space travel, now there are learnings that could be applied to intercontinental travel, and you completely redefining the dimensions on which you measure these, the amount of time it will take to travel, how you're going to work out the cost, etc. So it's very exciting in terms of the potential it holds. Of course, go back to any science fiction of 90 years old, like people talk of flying cars have still not happened. The closest we have come to are drones. Flying cars haven't happened. So there are things which do not happen, even though, it looks like an obvious juxtaposition. But on space travel, transferring into intercontinental travel, I'm very excited about it. And I just hope, one doesn't have to wait for 20 years to close that loop as well. The way, I got to close for, the internet being a substitute to airline travel, the way I had that last week. So I think that's all that I had to share. Again, thank you, Professor Ganesh, and I'm Indore for giving me this opportunity to interact with all of you.
Thank you, Rahul. Now we'll open up for questions. Those of you who have questions, please raise your hand. Then Rahul can invite them to raise their questions.
Yes, Umang. I can see Umang has raised his hand.
Yeah, thank you for giving wonderful talk. I just want to know what's the scope of blockchain in our country, India.
So blockchain, I'll give you a two-layered answer, and I'll tell you why it's two-layered. See, as a concept, when a few years back, the entire concept of blockchain or a distributed ledger, and these concepts started coming up, immediately you will say, oh yes, this is strong. Yet the struggle since then has been on figuring out what problem would it actually end up solving. So at a conceptual level, one could think of a variety of issues, whether it leads to currencies, whether it leads to transactable or investable currencies, or smart agreements, smart contracts. I think here's a classic case where the technology platform or the technology solution was so strong that I think it moved ahead of the consumer solution, the consumer problem that was being solved being there. So I believe this is where I think there's been a bit of a mismatch. It is inevitable. There's a role that blockchain will play across industries. I think it still is a race, and it's an open area for somebody to figure out the perfect fitment for what that consumer solution would be, where one could deploy. So yes, I would not write off in any way. I think I'm a believer in the fundamental power of what these technologies could do. I think they're looking for a perfect solution, and I think the jury's out there in terms of which is going to be the first high impact area for them. Chetan.
Hi,
Chetan,
Rahul.
yeah.
Hi,
Hey,
Rahul.
Chetan.
Can you hear me? Yep.
Yes, I can hear you, Chetan.
Hi, Rahul. This is Chetan Ananthan from the batch of 2007 and 2009. It's nice speaking to you after a very long time.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, my question is around data privacy, because I know the buzzword in the last couple of years on this online space or the technology space is on data privacy. Europe came up with the data privacy laws. Most of the other countries are coming up with data privacy laws. While we are improving upon the technology and sharing of data, how well do you think India is positioned when it comes to the data privacy and the laws around it? I personally feel we are lagging behind, but being a senior in the industry, I just wanted your view on that. Thank you.
No, hey Chetan, thanks for the question. And just for everyone else, I mean, Chetan, I met for the first time and had gone back to the campus, and he was nice enough to host me for a couple of hours in his room in the new campus. I mean, we didn't, people like us, people like me, did not study at the new campus. So I'm glad to interact with Chetan here. Chetan, I think your question is valid, and I would also not contest your take on the situation, but it's in the nature of the industry itself. This is not an industry where innovation comes from policy. It has been an industry where policy has always trailed the innovation that comes about, and I think we're seeing that classic question play out. Yes, you're right. There would be countries and entities which would take to it faster and would take a certain approach. There would be countries which take a slight wait and watch approach, still trying to evolve, still trying to evaluate and look for the correct implementation, for the correct set of guidelines, which instead of hindering are actually forward-looking, so that instead of acting as a impediment, you are able to use that for growing the industry for much greater good of society and the country. So I think we currently in that it's that kind of play out which is happening. Again, I'll go back to the example of that the way UPI worked out, payments worked out. Again, I'm saying here nobody was looking for the industry did not even get a time to say that policy is lagging or lacking. And an overall guidance and framework came out in which there was some participation by the government entities, there was participation by private players, by activists, and the solution that has come out has very little criticism. I mean, it's only had, what you hear from people by and large is that it has enabled a lot of industries. It is flexible enough for more opportunities to be built on top. So I believe even in other areas, like legacy, etc. My understanding is I think it's work in progress, and this back and forth between technology going slightly ahead and behind, technology always being ahead of policy. I think that will continue to play out. So even if we may have a policy whenever which is seen as, wow, this is a wonderful policy, there would be a time at which a new set of technologies will emerge, which will again challenge an existing policy regime to evolve. I mean, just one small example. You're aware of every time you hear in some domains, you hear of technologies, you hear of a law which was enacted in 1885. So I'm saying in some areas, and that has stood the test of time, it has worked well, and there's a point at which you say, no, this definitely doesn't work for this industry anymore. So yeah, that's my take, Chetan, that I think it's work in progress. There is some evaluation and some observation which is happening. And as I said, I will not contest your view in terms of whether it's there or it's lacking, but I see it more as a work in progress. Amit Sahu asked me a question. Could you repeat the name of the technology analyst? Benedict. Isn't it Benedict Evans? Benedict Evans. Benedict Evans. So that's a gentleman. I think you should follow anybody who's interested in technology and the technology and telecom domain. He remains one of the top global analysts in the space. I guess I cannot see any more questions on my screen. Amit, are you Amit Sahu?
Yeah. Hi.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Okay. I have one question. Like in the recent times, we had this COVID scenario, right, wherein there are people who are in very remote parts of the country and they're facing certain issues, and we're finding it difficult to reach out to them to kind of help them online through various chat services, because some are on WhatsApp, some are on different platforms. So do you see in future, when you talk about the, let's say, at national level disaster response programs, is there any collaboration which is going to happen between different services so that it will help us to kind of reach out to the people who are facing these kind of issues? Be they, I mean, they might be on different platform, but some kind of collaboration which can happen in future, which will help them to reach out to them at quickest time possible.
No, absolutely. I think you're absolutely right. It is definitely going to happen. And as I mentioned to you, that a lot of learnings for this have come from and coming from a variety of domains. So there are specialists in logistics and delivery, and so there's a role that they have to play. They will be playing, and you are absolutely right. It's also going to be a collaborative approach. Which will see participation from various governments at various levels. You will see participation by organizations, enterprises, institutions, and then of course there'll be individuals as well. So this is, I think, it's inevitable, and I think again that's the way some of the learnings come to societies at large. Some of them we have to go through a lot of pain to arrive at certain learning, and I just hope if hopefully it doesn't, that if at all we are faced with calamities of similar or slightly different scales, we'll be much better prepared to handle them. So you're right, collaboration is the way to go, and it is inevitable. Arhant Dungarwal has asked, may I know your valuable opinion on the recent developments of Australia charging Google and Facebook for news and this issue's prospects in India? I think this is something that people are observing very keenly, and this is something that has happened for a long time. If you were to observe that, and I'll just take a minute to share with you one of my previous, when we were working at the IBO group, one of our principal investors was a company from South Africa called Naspers. So Naspers used to be the biggest, media company of South Africa. They used to run with businesses across print, television, online, etc. And then we would interact with them, and they would talk to us about India, and I'm talking of mid 2000s or late 2000s, around leading up to 2010. India was the only market in the world where newspapers were still selling, and not only selling, they were growing. The rest of the world, had seen newspapers being completely phased out in favor of online, the online consumption of news. And India was the only market where it was happening. And we continue to have 1,000-odd publications of various form and nature. And then we would explain to them how the newspaper ecosystem works in India, that after consuming a newspaper, which used to cost a couple of bucks then, today, I know, some 4, 5, 6 rupees. So we paid practically nothing for newspapers. And then at the end of a month or 2 months, we could actually sell it off to a Raddiwala, where it would go for a recycling, workflow. We would actually earn back some of the money. And all the money, the business model was completely supported by advertisers. And they would be quite surprised at the way the Indian market. So we were a little different. And then, so the Indian market was always a little different from the other markets. Even right now, even if you see it, we've been through another 10 years since the time I had this interaction. Newspapers are still there. They continue to evolve in a certain way. They're also adapting as they go along. But some of the newspapers are very well entrenched still in terms of their hold on advertisers, their hold on audiences. So Indian space evolves differently, and therefore when you look at markets like Australia, etc., they've always been slightly. India has been slightly different from these markets. But having said that, I think India is also 2 or 3 other interesting models that have been emerging in India. One is of course a Jio model, where a lot of this comes bundled as part of the Jio value offerings to people. Then there are other independent players who've been trying subscription model, and even with the subscription there are multiple variants. There is some which is free, and at some point you start paying. There are some who are just doing 1 story per day, but but everything is in that sense inside a walled garden. So models are emerging. I believe we will see a lot more in India than these isolated examples that's seen from Australia. So no specific answers, but yeah, it's an interesting space to watch.
Thank you, sir.
Kapil asked me, what do you think about the big business houses entering into making super app like Tata, Reliance? What is the future of super app in the Indian context? This is one of the toughest questions to answer. But in fact, the answer to this is not going to come from technology. That again, as I said, the technology to make a super app is easy. I mean, there'll be people in our Indore community only, or in the organization that we work for, that you'll gather a product manager, gather the best of coders, and you will make an app which has all the features of a super app. But it is not about a software solution. Any super app. In fact, any successful software is not the success of the technology alone, because technology can be replicated. It is how you have understood a couple of the following: human psychology, marketplaces, how people interact as individuals in smaller communities and as part of bigger communities. Understanding how those ecosystems work and what are the interlinkages between those is what will dictate a successful super app coming out of India. It is not going to come out of a software solution. I just want to kind of completely cut it along that axis. That software solutions, I believe in the market already there will be successful software solutions. But it's about how are businesses able to create a bunch of experiences in a common envelope where none of these appear to be forced. Each of them is solving a problem, a real world problem for the consumers in its own right. So it's not an inferior solution. You're solving the problem the way it should be solved. And yet you are able to create a mix of solutions where there's a gestalt happening, that the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. That is what a successful super app ought to be. Now, who would do it? Of course, I'll put my money on Jio doing it better and before anybody else does it. But it's again, as I said, the answer lies in how everyone cracks these aspects, not the technology aspect. Technology is a given; it has to be there, but that alone is not going to ensure successful consumer adoption. Okay, sir, how are we doing on time? I think we can take one more question. So the last question we'll take, this is from Gaurav. What is the recommended way for arriving at a valuation for a technology tech company? Oh my goodness, one of the most difficult question. I believe there are enough models in the space, in this space, which investors, equity companies, venture capitalists, whether of investors at any stage follow, and there are some of these have structured, some structured science behind it, and they back it up with a certain success rate. Then some of them also bank on the ability of these investors to see a technology trend before anybody else does. And the data available to them at that point of time may not be enough for them to make a structured modular kind of a response and arrive at, hey, this is the kind of weight that I put for this company or startup. So I believe that both exist, and I believe there is merit in both, because both of them are both of them have a certain proportion of their business, of the certain proportion of their investments as successes. So one would say that they know how they're doing it. So there's no easy answer, and I believe even if you are in either of those two capacities where you have enough data to arrive at a valuation using some technique, some modeling technique, or you're using your intuition and insight at a level where you do not have enough data. I believe there are specialists and experts who've done a great job of both, and I believe some of them also happen to be a part of the Indore community, alumni community as well. So that is how I would answer it, Gaurav.